Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Unleashing Potentials podcast. Joining me today is special guest Tricia Clark. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you? I'm
I am warming up. I'm fantastic and I'm freezing at the same time.
same here in Arkansas, not probably as cold as you in Canada, but it's
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a little chilled today,
Mhm,
but it's all
mhm.
good.
Yeah. So you're in Arkansas.
I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
What state is that in?
So Arkansas is this, I'm in Bella Vista is the city within Arkansas.
Oh,
I'm really close to Missouri in the States.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of right in between that South to Midwest. Um,
Okay. I see. I
yeah,
see.
if you're in the southern corner of the state, you really get that southern drawl and southern belle sound.
Yeah.
And then as you get closer to Missouri, it's a little bit different.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Welcome to the podcast. So excited you're
Thanks.
here. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, Tricia, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I am. So, well, we'll start a little bit personally because that leads
Yeah.
into what my business is. But I am a married mom of two, recent empty nester. My kids are 19 and 24, so in college.
Mhm.
And as they're moving on in their life, I decided to kind of launch my passion business a couple years ago to really lean into the things that light me up in addition to my full-time job. And so I'm a mealtime and relationship mentor. I work with women entrepreneurs and busy moms to help them simplify mealtime and get rid of all that stress and overwhelm that just inherently comes with it when you're juggling all the things, and really simplify it so that when they show up to meal plan or cook or show up to the table, it can really be more of a time of connection instead of frustration. And that just kind of came out of my own journey. And so we do that through meal planning and creative cooking, like experimenting with things to find out what feels good, what you like, what you don't like, and really dig into the mindset of it all, like what makes it stressful and overwhelming. And it's a little bit different for everyone.
Mhm.
And so really leaning into cooking for yourself. It could be part of self-care, but it's also part of family connection. So it's really from that standpoint more than a health or nutrition perspective. It's about the connections that we make around the table.
That is so cool. You're the first person who does what you do that I've interviewed on the podcast. First.
Oh, awesome. I mean,
Yes,
there's a few of
yes.
us out here, but there's, not a ton that I've found.
Yes, that is so cool that you do that. Yes, it can be so frustrating to cook. I
Yes.
use HelloFresh. I don't know if you've heard of it, the
Oh,
company.
yeah. Yeah.
You
Oh, I've
know
tried
what?
them. I've tried all the subscription boxes.
Yeah. Oh, you have.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have. Yeah, and so that's really it's been a long journey, but I mean, what I discovered is there are so many solutions out there. From you can buy meal plans, you can look up new recipes on Pinterest, you can sign up for HelloFresh.
Mhm.
Um, so many different options. And I was selling Pampered Chef. I don't know if you're familiar with Pampered Chef products, but I was selling
I've
Pampered
heard of
Chef
that. Yeah.
products for a while. It's a multi-level marketing, kitchen tools, gadgets, cookware,
Mhm.
home party based business. And it was really fun. And it was a way for me to share my love of cooking. But I discovered really quickly that there were all these different solutions, but there was nobody talking about how to tie them all together
Mhm.
to develop long-term repeatable habits so that it would be less frustrating on a consistent basis, so that you really can enjoy that connection around the table that we all want. Like I remember, and I've probably told this story a million times if anybody's ever heard me before, but I remember my kids being little and just feeling like I was throwing food on the table and frustrated and wondering why nobody appreciated me and why nobody wanted to talk.
Yeah.
And it was awful. It
Mhm.
was awful. And so kind of getting a different lens of that and seeing, oh, I can kind of see why
Mhm.
we've got all these different things that are amazing solutions, but there's nobody out there to really help you figure out what the process is that works for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Where did your love for cooking came from? Is it you watched someone cooking as you were growing up, or you just
You
woke up
know,
and you're like, I'm gonna cook today?
yeah, no. I was an extremely picky eater. If it wasn't frozen, canned, or in a box as a kid, I wouldn't eat it. Like I was awful. And my mom didn't force it. I'm the youngest of four. She was like, she'll figure it out. I don't even have the energy for this. And so it wasn't until I was an adult and I went through a really traumatic experience in my early 20s. And when I came out of that, I started making connections with people. And the truth is, I made connections with all the wrong people, but that's a totally different conversation for a totally different podcast. But that's part of my story, in that as I started making friends, like one of the things, we were broke, right? And so my friends that I worked with, we would meet at lunch and we would gather the ingredients we had from our pantries just to figure out what we could make for lunch because we were broke and starving. And so I started mixing things together, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And then when I got married and had kids, I was like, oh God, I got to feed these people. And I don't know how, and I don't want them to eat and grow up the way that I did. And so I started learning how to cook while I was on maternity leave, watching Food Network of all things, because that's realistic. And in that process, I just found that I loved it. I loved to cook and I loved to share that with people. And it reminded me of even those lunches when I was broke, thinking, wow, okay, so this is more, it's about more than the food, it's the connections. And so we started entertaining and having parties. And I could just tell that people loved coming in, and I loved making people feel accepted and welcome. And food was my way to do that. And it was working for everyone except my family.
Yeah, yeah. There are so many different branches we could tackle with this interview, but we're gonna go somewhere.
Yeah.
I have a very, very picky son, and I run out of ideas. I went to see my doctors about it. I'm like, I don't know what else to do. And she said, he's healthy, he's gaining weight, but he just won't eat most of the things I do. So he likes his baking. So I sneak in spinach, the stuff I blend, you won't even know they're in there. So that's what I've had to do. Um, and yeah, it's expensive. I I I tell people I'm on a broke income. It's true. It doesn't last, especially with kids. They're constantly eating and then constantly wasting food as well.
Yeah.
And
And boys eat,
yeah,
I don't know what it is about boys, but I feel like they eat 10 times as much as girls.
yeah, like vacuums. It just open the fridge
Yeah.
and it's
And it's
gone.
not, I don't even feel like mine has ever eaten a lot at one time, but he just eats
Yeah,
all day.
yeah, yeah. Mine too. Two of them. They just vacuum the whole place.
So how old are your kids?
My youngest is 6, my oldest is 13,
Okay. Which one is the picky one?
the younger one.
The younger one. That doesn't surprise me. So, I mean, well, age 6, they're also really trying to assert that independence, right? So, I think one of the things we have to do as parents is really think about, is there truly like a sensory disorder? Is it a texture thing? Is it a, there's so many of those things we have to rule out. Or are they just trying to assert their independence and saying, I don't like it, and setting their foot down to create those boundaries, to try to
Yeah.
create some sense of control like we do?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if that's what it is, then we just have, like, if it's really about that sense of control,
Mm-hmm.
it's really about figuring out what worked for in our family was always kind of gamifying it.
Yeah.
So we always had a 3-bite rule. And so any new food, you have to take 3 bites. And the reason I picked 3 is the first one, they've already said, I don't like it and I don't want it. And
Yeah.
they're determined to not like it.
Yeah.
The second one, they're like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the third one, they have a pretty good idea if they like that food, and maybe it's not that food, or they don't like the way it's cooked.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so once they eat those 3 bites, I never fought them on it again. It was like, once you eat those 3 bites, I'll give you seconds of anything else you want, but you got
Yeah.
to take the 3 bites.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. In your opinion, how important do you think it is for us parents to teach our kids of the importance of healthy eating and building a healthy relationship with food?
I think it's incredibly important. I really do. I watched my mom yo-yo diet my whole life and her whole life, basically.
Mm.
And then also had these really bad eating habits because I wasn't encouraged to eat healthy. And I remember my best friend, I mean, I'm 54 now, and I've had the same best friend since I was 12. And it was just a few years ago. She said, Trish, you've been on a diet since you were 12.
Wow.
And that hit really hard because I'd never thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just what you watch, right? And
Yeah.
so I think teaching them is important, but I think even more importantly is leading by example of what that looks like. and that we don't label food as good or as bad, because I think that's when we get into trouble, right? Or when we say, you keep eating like that, that's going to land on your hips in 10 years. I mean, we think we're being funny, but it's not funny. That stuff
Mhm.
sticks, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I think it's about making sure that we offer them a plethora of foods over and over,
Mhm.
even when they think they don't like it, because not all foods are cooked the same, right? Let's take a canned green bean versus a fresh green bean. Those experiences are very, very different. Um, and so I think reintroducing the same healthy foods in different ways, cooked different ways, in different dishes, is one way that really helps you get out of that picky food mode, that picky eater mode,
Mhm.
because you're probably going to find a way that they like it. There are
Yeah.
some foods they're just going to hate, like squash. My son, like, if it any kind of squash, he is 19 and he's not going to touch it, and it will still make him gag. Like, he just,
Ooh.
okay, we've
Yeah.
tried it 20
Yeah.
different ways. I get it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
still put it on your plate and you can pick it out. Like, I'm not changing what I cook.
Yeah.
You can decide if you're going to eat it or not.
Mhm.
Um, and so I do think it's important that we have those conversations, that food is fuel, but food is also a connector. Food is also fun, and everything in moderation. I think that's really my message. If I, more than anything, it's not about, what healthy eating means is different to every person, right? For
Yeah.
one person, that's keto. For one person, that's vegan. The term healthy eating is just, I don't know, BS in my opinion, for
Oh,
lack of
I
a better
agree.
word.
I think if someone's eating, if they're feeding their bodies somehow, maybe
Yeah.
it's half junk and half healthy, who knows? But they're still, they find energy, they do things they need to
Mhm.
do. But yeah, yeah, I've always had a love and hate relationship with the dieting industry because of
Yes.
how they tell people to eat. It's not wrong and it's not right. It's not necessary most of the time because I
Yeah.
think most of us don't need another adult or company to necessarily tell us eat this. We can get second opinions and apply it if we need to. What are your thoughts? I don't know if I'm kind of going off track.
Yeah, no, I feel like I just try to even remove the word diet from my vocabulary.
Yeah.
Um, the diet culture is so toxic in my opinion, because there's so many varying opinions,
Hmm.
and it's like, okay, what's right, what's wrong? And the truth is, every single one of our bodies is very, very different.
Yeah.
And I found that what one person deems healthy purely just doesn't agree with my body and the way my body processes food. And so I think what's more important is teaching ourselves and our children how to listen to our bodies, to know
Hmm.
what works for us and what doesn't. And yes, when I talk about healthy eating, for me, it's really about balance, and it's about making sure that we're giving our bodies the nutrients that it needs from vegetables and fruits and meats. And there is still room for sweets and baked goods in there. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think anything should ever be forbidden.
Yeah. 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 I agree. And I think how we were raised and our relationship with food, even our parents' relationship impacts us. An example I can give from my own situation is I grew up in a farm where there were goats, chicken, and all those delicious birds that were alive. And I was taught how to, sorry, kill them and then, and clean
Yeah.
them. And then I grew up eating fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, and everything fresh. And then I came here, there's canned stuff. I'm like, what is this shit? I don't like the smell of it. I don't like how it feels. I don't like what it does to my tongue or stomach.
Mhm.
I still struggle. And then I still struggle to drink cow's milk because I grew up drinking mostly goat's milk and just other oats milk and other stuff, right? And I know I'm
Yeah.
not alone. There are lots of people that are immigrants or how they were raised, and it's a constant battle. Doesn't matter how old they are. They gotta
Yeah.
try to weave and blend in what's right for them, and they have to
Mhm.
decide what that is.
On my podcast, Mealtime Magic and Mayhem, I had a really cool conversation. I think it comes out next week. Actually, it hasn't dropped yet. But I had a fascinating conversation with a lady who's Swiss, and she works for like the Swiss energy regulators or something. But she's really done this fascinating study of energy and taken it from this scientific perspective, but I would say combined it with what we would consider woo. and talked about measuring personal energy. And our whole conversation was about how you can use your body to understand, like, is the food that I'm about to consume, is this the
Mhm.
right energy for my body, and how you listen to your body to figure that out. And it was just fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, huh, I've never really thought about it that way. And she was talking about like using your body as a pendulum, whereas my practice thus far has just really been mindful eating and paying attention to what I eat. If I don't feel good, what have I been eating?
Yeah.
And dairy is one of those things that I have to do in very limited quantities. And I grew up with it. It's not the same thing as what you're talking about in terms of immigrating and
Oh,
having
you
to get used
sorry,
to
you're
all different
getting the
foods. But
microphone on your
oh,
face on your thing.
there we go. Is that better?
Yeah, that's good. It was just
Okay.
blocking half of
Woo!
glasses.
And
Yeah.
it just fell right off. That's fun. Maybe that was fun.
Uh, yeah, I just put mine down somewhere. Mine's down here. You can't see it.
Oh, okay. We're not going to touch that anymore.
Yeah, I was just blocking your vision. Sorry. Go ahead.
So I think, dairy is one of those. And again, it's listening to your body. But, I think it's very obvious the more fresh foods we eat, the better we feel.
Yeah.
They haven't been processed as much. And so to me, eating less processed food, I'm never going to be 100% organic and clean eating. Like, one, it gets more expensive.
Yeah.
It takes a lot more effort. I'd have to go to 3 or 4 grocery stores, and I just don't have time for that.
Mm.
So I make the small changes that I can and incorporate what I can and try to cook with as much fresh as I can. The
Yeah.
truth is, my son loves canned green beans. So I do make him canned green beans because he's
Yeah.
still getting a vegetable and he will eat them. And
Yeah.
when I cook fresh green beans, he says they squeak and he doesn't like them. Like,
Yeah.
they all have
Yeah. Yeah.
their thing.
Interesting. Yeah, I think you're talking about Cornelia. I had her on the podcast too.
Yes, it is
Yeah.
Cornelia.
Yeah. Yeah. She was on the podcast. Yeah, she's fantastic. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I mean, check out that because she's fascinating to talk to.
yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, let's talk about organic stuff like you just mentioned. Um, hmm, my adoptive mom, she passed, but she would only eat organic, very whole wheat, whole grain stuff. And I hold on to that, but I don't
Yeah.
necessarily can afford organic stuff. I don't know why organic food is so expensive. I have no clue.
Oh, that's a really great question. I mean, you would think it would be cheaper because they're using less of all the things they have to pay for to take care of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, on the flip side of that, there's also probably more manual labor involved in the processing of it, the harvesting of it, the taking care of it. And
Yeah.
there's fewer of them. So there's less supply. Therefore, in supply and demand, I think the price just goes up.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's an element of that, but I don't feel like it should be as much more expensive as it is. But it's not an
Yeah.
industry. I've never been a farmer. Like, I don't,
Yeah.
those are the pieces of it that I don't really understand. Now, I do know that I can tell I do think on some foods I can tell the difference
Mhm.
in how my body reacts to it.
Mhm.
So like if I'm in Mexico and they've got fresh grown avocados, I can eat them and not get sick. But if I buy avocados in the States, I get sick every time I eat them. So I do believe there's a difference
Oh, yeah.
about like whether it's organic or how long the travel time is from harvest to when we get
Yeah.
to eat it and everything that goes through in between. Like
Yeah.
I do feel like all of that impacts it by the time we consume it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know what real fruit tastes like, and many other people from tropical countries, we know what it tastes like. It's much bigger and there's just more into it. And then I go to the store, I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's all I say. It
Yeah.
doesn't taste as good. It tastes like whatever chemical they may spray to carry or
Hmm.
hold it. It's just nasty. I just go for
Yeah.
frozen stuff instead of the fresh because they make it more expensive, right? There are so many companies that are saying, eat healthy, it's good for you, it's better for you. But to do that, we're going to charge you more. We're going to make it
Yeah.
cost more. It's going
Yeah.
to be bad. It's just come a lot of different messages that comes through.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
really do. And then just the price of food in general. I mean, the price of eggs and the price of food in general has increased so much in our current economical environment that it is becoming more expensive,
Yeah.
to eat. We have to get more creative with the foods that that we cook. I know my family doesn't love leftovers, so I've had to get more creative about repurposing them so that we're not wasting as much.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
all of those things, figuring out how to use that produce maybe in freezer meals so that we're not throwing it out waiting to cook it the next time, but maybe we can freeze it and use it later in something else. Trying to get creative to create less waste, I think, is another place we can lean in a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, how can we find joy and purpose in cooking? Because I'm sorry, but not everyone likes to cook.
Yeah. No, no. And I don't believe that everyone is going to fall in love with cooking, but I do believe that we can each find a process that is easier and less stressful for us, whether that's I believe it all starts with really having a meal plan. And I keep my meal plans very simple. I'm not talking about 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. Like that's not realistic for anybody.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I think it really starts with the energy and intention that we bring to it. If we can start to shift how we think about mealtime from I have to feed these people to I have an opportunity to connect with my people.
Mhm,
This one certain time a day, we all have to eat. So why not take advantage of that moment as the time that we get to connect
mhm,
instead of feeling like or treating it like it's that one more thing that we have to do? And
mhm,
if we can change that lens, and because I truly believe that what when we're cooking, the energy that we put into that experience comes out in the taste of the food, it comes out in the energy at the table. Like it does. If you think about when you sit down frustrated at the table, energy is contagious. Like positive energy, positive attitudes, the flip side on negative, right? And so the intention and the energy that we bring to it is where it starts for me. And then it's how do I create a plan that works for my lifestyle? Not a plan that somebody else created, but what works for me. Is
yeah.
that cooking 2 nights a week or 3 nights a week? Because if I know I can execute something really healthy and homemade twice a week,
Mm,
you're going to feel more accomplished. Your energy's different at the table. And you fill in the rest of the week with the convenience stuff because that's all you have the energy for, right?
mhm, mhm. Yeah.
And so a lot of it is about level setting our expectations and really addressing like, where does all that resistance come from when I start to feel stressed or angsty about it? Like, where's that come from?
Yeah, yeah.
And then how do we get rid of that? So, and I feel like we do a lot of mindset work out here in the entrepreneurial world, but we
Mhm.
don't necessarily remember to relate it to everything in our lives, even as something as simple as meal planning and
I
cooking.
agree, yeah. And also, it could be culturally as well, and how we were
Mhm.
brought up, which I keep going back to because it's important. Here's what I remember and know of my culture when it comes to food. Um, Food connects communities. We share it with neighbors, with friends, they come over. It is not unnatural, unusual for my culture, even people that are living here in Canada or other places, to message a neighbor, to knock at their door, hey, supper's ready. Did you eat today? How are the kids? Here's lunch for tomorrow for the kids. But here, oh my gosh, someone will call 911 if you offer them food. It's either poison, it's either they think you poison them, you're a creepy neighbor for giving them food, or you think they're broke that they need your help. Just all those culture stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know, I've gone through both, right?
Yeah,
And,
yeah, and I see
yeah,
that from my travels and I
yeah.
see that in other cultures, and it's truly, I mean, that is kind of a big part of my mission is to bring that in because I know here in the States that like we've lost a ton of that.
Oh
And I'm very
gosh.
fortunate. My next door neighbor, we're really tight with them, and I'll call her and I'll be like, "Hey, just made a huge batch of lasagna. We're never going to eat it all. Can I send some over to you guys?" Like
Yeah.
the ability to do that, we've maintained this friendship for 15 years.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
and it really is, that can be so healing for people when you don't even know that they need it, because we never know what's going on with someone else and what they're going through, right?
Yeah.
It is a way to communicate love without words.
Yeah. Yeah. It
It
is.
is a way to communicate connection.
Yeah.
I mean, you think even funerals, like bringing food and having a feast at a funeral has been a tradition.
Hmm.
I mean, for thousands of years, right? Food is the ultimate connector. It's a universal need. Like,
Hmm.
how do we how do we not take advantage of that?
Yeah, yeah. And in most cultures, as you've noticed in your travels, versus other countries, Canada, US, or other countries, they greet you with food. They don't ask you, "Can I
Mhm.
get you a cup of tea? Would you like some water?" You don't have a choice to ask those questions. They would be offended because they want you
Mhm.
to eat their food. That's how they show love and appreciation.
Yes.
But here, "Can I get you a cup of water or coffee?" I'm like, "I don't drink coffee, but I'll have water, please." Right? That's how they greet and show love. And
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that you've traveled. You're able to marry what you learn, what you know with the cultures that you interacted with. What have you learned through your travelings?
Oh man. So I learned so much about food. So like in my like the things that get me all excited and jazzed up is taking cooking classes when I travel because I want to learn how I want to learn how people eat and cook wherever I'm going.
Mhm.
And I see this need to this this need to feed is what I will call it, right?
Yeah,
Because that's
yeah.
their way of expressing love. And so
Mhm.
I've really learned the importance of family and extended family, whereas I feel like here it's like our immediate family, and a lot of us have extended family, but we're so focused on our immediate. And in so many other cultures, you've got multiple generations living in one house, which I don't know that I could ever handle, but
Yeah.
I admire it. I think it's beautiful.
Mm,
It's
mhm.
you're taking care of your parents that once took care of you, right? I've seen that in other cultures. I've learned to really appreciate the plethora and abundance of food that I have availability to in my travels
Yeah,
by seeing how other people live. And it really does make you appreciate where your food comes from and the processes that go into it, as well as just the appreciation that you have an abundance available when so many people don't.
yeah, yeah. That
And
yeah.
I've also learned the importance of rest and celebration. You know, you go to Italy and it's like they're open for lunch and they close for hours and they open back up for dinner. So if you hit the town at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're gonna have a hard time finding food.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, Yeah, there's so much to learn, but I get all excited about like I love to cook different cuisines and learn different cuisines. And so
Mm,
when I travel, the way I recreate those moments is I latch onto a food and take pictures and analyze what it tastes and smells and the textures. And then I try to recreate it at home in order to it's kind of like another photograph for me and taking us back to that moment.
yeah, I agree, yeah, yeah. You're right, there are cultures who live together. I grew up we had a three-layer house. It was big
Mhm.
enough, lots of rooms in it, and it was all families, and my grandma was there, my grandpa was there, cousins, nieces, and all of us had enough space. We all lived together. Three-story houses with different rooms. Like, "Ma, are you hungry? No, save it for later. Okay." And then we'd call each other when it was time to eat. One person then just grab the food and eat by themselves.
Yeah.
All of us came together.
It's an
Do
event,
massive
right? It's a big event and it's
food.
filled with
Yeah,
laughter and
yeah.
conversation. They're
Mhm.
not rushing to get through it to the next task.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's the thing with the culture we live in here. I've had to swallow food just to pick up my kids
Yeah.
or just to do chores or get stuff done. It's a hassle culture, and I've had to
Yeah.
adapt to it,
Yeah.
and I don't
But I
love
don't
it.
think you have to, I really think there's a way, not again, like sitting down at the table as a family, as much as I talk about this, that's not the way. So I go back to what works for you. That's not
Yeah.
the way my family has historically shared dinner. We don't all sit down at the table together,
Mhm.
but it might be when our kids were teenagers and didn't want to talk to us, right? We might sit down in the living room and my son would get to pick a show that he wanted to watch. That was a way for me to understand what was important to him. We're all eating in front of the TV, which a bunch of people will tell you is a no-no. I don't care. If
We do
that's what it
that.
takes
Yeah,
to get him to talk to me and
yeah,
tell me and show me something that's important to him and
yeah,
he feels fed and nourished, that's a win in my opinion.
yeah, 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 I
And
agree.
so it is about maybe eating in front of the TV works for us 3 nights a week and we eat at the table 1 night a week.
Mhm.
Um, you know, again, it's letting go of all those perceived coulds and shoulds and the expectations we feel like have been put on us to say, that doesn't work for me. I need to figure out what works for me and my family and my children where
Yeah.
we thrive.
Yeah. Yeah. And another one advice I would give, or people can take it or leave it, let the kids inside the kitchen.
Yes.
I've been in the kitchen since I could crawl, since I could walk. So when I'm cooking here, I don't use recipes. I don't measure anything. I know exactly what to put, how to put it, when to put it. Why? Because I watched grandma do it.
Yeah.
I watch mom do it, or whoever does it. But here, obviously, there are safety protocols and blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Sure.
Make sure no fingers are flying off or nothing.
Yeah.
But let the kids get their hands messy. Let them feel the texture of food. Let them throw it around. I let my son bake, and he is so proud of the mess he
Yes.
makes. So proud. And he loves it. My daughter, she cooks.
Yeah, well, and studies show that children that are involved in the kitchen, even from young of an age of 3, and
Yeah.
technically they can help you even younger, but like
Yeah.
3, they can help you stir, right? Younger than that, they can help you get out ingredients and get out utensils. Like
Yeah.
there's always something they can do, and they learn from that.
Yeah.
But studies show that kids will exponentially are more likely to try the foods that they're part of preparing. So if you have a picky eater, that is one of the biggest ways you
Mhm.
can get them to try something new,
Yeah.
is just by getting them involved. And that doesn't mean they have to be in there with you from start to finish. It doesn't mean they have to be in there with you every night, but inviting them in, one, makes them feel welcome. And
Mm.
two, I will tell you, as somebody who didn't know how to cook as an adult,
Yeah.
will set them up for success. Like my son who's in college, I
Mhm.
called him the other day and I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm just cooking some chicken shawarma." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I bought some chicken thighs, bought some shawarma seasoning. I'm making some
Yeah.
shawarma.
Yeah.
I'm meal prepping for the week." And I'm like,
Wow.
I was just so happy because
Wow.
he's not eating out every night. And he still eats out
Yeah.
too
Yeah.
much,
Yeah.
probably for a broke college student, but
Hmm.
it's probably why he's broke.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
but he's cooking for himself.
Wow.
And he knows how to do it and he's confident in doing it, and getting them involved in the kitchen just makes a huge difference, not only now and throughout your relationship with them,
Mm.
but also into the future that they can take care of themselves
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. My son had a meltdown because I accidentally forgot to let him pour a cheese in something we were making. He said, "I'm a big boy. I'm cooking. Listen to me, mommy. Let me pour." And then I pour it in. I got distracted. And he's like, "What happened?" I said, "I'm sorry. I forgot to let." And he melted down a little bit, and then he was fine. But
Oh, I
yeah.
love that. I love that you're bringing them in, and I'm going to go back to when you think of the way you grew up in this 3-level house with your grandma and multiple generations, you had the opportunity to watch and learn from them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so we do have to be more intentional now in the environment that we live to get them involved. The other thing I'll say is when you get them involved in doing something like that with you, they feel much more connected. They're also much more likely to open up to you about what's going on in their lives without having to ask the question, how was your day today? What did you learn? Like we ask the same boring questions every time, and they don't want to talk about school any more than we want to talk about work at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so we have to get creative about how to get them to open up.
Yeah.
And it's open-ended questions. It's inviting them in and making sure that they feel welcome and comfortable
Yeah.
in the kitchen.
Yeah, yeah, that's I don't
Really.
even touch the foods I get from HelloFresh because she cooks and my daughter.
Oh,
Like,
that's
because there's few options. I'm like, "What's for supper today? What do you feel like eating?" And she picked it and cook it. And she's a better baker than I am. She does stuff from scratch and they taste so good. And I
oh,
need the
I love that.
pre-made flour for mine, and
Yeah. Does she
I
have a
don't know
scientific
how.
brain?
Wow, I don't even know how she does it. She makes a apple French cake, her own batter, and with the apple and everything. I'm like, "Can you mommy's having a bad day, sweetie. Can you go cook it?"
Well, cooking and
Yeah.
baking are very different skills. Like I'm not a great
Ooh.
baker. I
Oh
can
my
cook, but
gosh.
like you,
Yeah,
like I I have a tendency to look at it, even if I'm following a recipe, I have a tendency to not really measure.
yeah.
I just kind of eyeball it, right? And you
Yeah,
can't do that with baking. I've
No,
tried.
I've
Doesn't work.
tried to.
No.
It just doesn't work. I'm like,
No,
baking
no, it
doesn't love
doesn't.
me. Yeah, let's talk about meal planning.
Yeah.
What have you used when your kids were growing up, and what do you suggest for parents to use, especially if they have kids that are going to school? Because I know lots of people do homeschooling, but I ship
Mhm.
mine to school so I can have space and time. What would you suggest for those parents?
Do you prefer to send lunches with them or do they do school lunch?
Both. They
Both.
they do
Okay.
school lunches, but yeah, I do pack them lunch.
Yeah. So when it comes to meal planning, I'm still old school. I've tried to do it digitally. Like I still have to write stuff down and I keep one, I have a magnet board I ordered from Amazon that I keep on the fridge.
Mhm.
And I make a lunch plan or a meal plan every week. And my meal plan literally consists of, and this is a little bit more of an answer to your question, but
Mhm.
if digital works for you and you want it on your phone, like you've got to experiment a little bit and figure out
Yeah,
what really works. I've tried digitally and I can't, my brain remembers when I write things down.
me
So
too.
that's what works for me. But
Yeah.
I'll go through and look at my calendar and say, these 3 nights are going to be nuts and there's no way I'm going to be able to cook anything from scratch. So
Mhm.
I'm either going to cook something from frozen or we call it a fend for yourself night and you're on your own. And I keep things around, like whether it's chicken nuggets or it's, frozen dinners, I keep things around so that somebody can grab something, stuff to make, grilled cheese, whatever, for those fend for yourself nights.
Mhm.
And then I pick 2 or 3 nights if I don't have anything going on. Those are the nights I know that I want to try a new recipe and still weeknights, like keep your keep your schedule in mind. Like don't try to cook something that's going to take an hour or two on a weeknight if you're working.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and so the key for meal planning to me is really being realistic about your schedule and how many nights can I realistically pull this off and feel good about it.
Mhm.
And then if I only have 30 minutes, to make sure you're only picking recipes that take less than 30 minutes. Like you've got to find those trusted resources where you're not just going down the Pinterest rabbit hole all the time.
We all go there at some point.
Mhm. And end up then with like 10 cinnamon roll and yummy cake recipes. And we never did find the chicken recipe we were looking for to cook dinner, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it is very hard when there's more than one picky person. Could be a
Hmm.
child or an adult. It's like,
It
who am I
is.
cooking for today? So I've dealt with that. It is so hard. So hard.
Yeah, so there, a lot of times what I lean into is things like a baked potato bar or a
Mm.
taco bar where you can put everything out and they have that sense of control to make their own choices, but everybody's eating the same thing and not cooking more than one meal. We don't have time to be a short order cook, nor do I believe that it teaches them the right message if you cook
Mhm.
like a short order cook, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Yeah,
and
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
we use a lot of those things. So chili in our house. I love chili with beans. My husband hates chili with beans. So I cook a big batch of chili and
Yeah,
I separate it in half and I add the beans in the last 10 minutes. We're both happy.
yeah.
I mean, it's really about thinking through those, which battles you want to fight and which ones, if there's something they really don't like, leave it big enough they can pick it out.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's tricky.
it,
Yeah,
it, it,
I
it really can be. And I said, and it does take some trial and error and it takes some experimentation. So you really have to be ready and committed to making that change if you want to make it. But it definitely is possible. And it can definitely, even for people that don't enjoy cooking, I think you can find joy and fun in it when you figure out how it works
yeah,
and the things that work for you. And maybe you're not going to love it, but you're
mhm,
at least mealtime can bring you more joy.
yeah, yeah.
If you get the collection of 15-minute recipes that you love and that's,
Mhm.
you've got that nailed down, then you've got more energy to show
Yeah,
up differently.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, so I use HelloFresh. Obviously, they do the work and they just deliver my food and
Hmm.
recipes. Not everyone is able to either afford it or like their services. I don't know why anyone would not like it, from my own egoistic opinion. Would you say it's easy for people to look at recipes, write them down, and then branch out the ingredients from the recipe or recipes and take it to the grocery store?
So I think it's easier, like once you've picked what you're going to cook, is definitely to write down those ingredients
Mm,
or just immediately. I do grocery pickup or delivery. I don't need to go to the store anymore.
yeah.
And so if I've picked out the 3 recipes, I just, rather than even write them down, I'll be looking at that and I'll go straight into the grocery app and just add it to my cart. And I do it all at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And if you're only picking 3 recipes instead of trying to cook 7 nights a week, right? And you've got that right there, like you really can get that done much faster than we have built up in our heads as to how long that it takes. We think it's going to take hours, right?
Yeah.
But if you create that curated collection, or you have a curated collection of trusted resources, or maybe it's a list of recipes, maybe it's one favorite cookbook, then you're like, okay, I'm going to pick 3 recipes from here. I'm going to put those in the grocery app. You're done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We talked about lunches and packing lunches. I'm a big fan of the bento box style where, whether it's even like a little charcuterie plate, where you've got meats, cheeses, fruits. Um, there are a lot of sandwiches you can make and freeze ahead of time, like wraps.
Yeah.
There's, a lot of that meal prep that you can do to save yourself time from having to do it every day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think meal prepping breakfast and lunch is a huge help. And then
Mm-hmm.
and, I don't do a ton of meal prepping, but if I do, it's generally for lunch. Just so
Yeah.
maybe it's a big batch of soup and then in individual containers for the week that they can grab and throw in a lunchbox.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's really making it easy on yourself and keeping it simple is, they're not expecting anything fancy and gourmet. So don't set those expectations for yourself.
Yeah. And give me your thoughts and opinions of those who are afraid to cook, afraid to mess up, afraid to touch the food, afraid that it's not going to be sliced the same way that it needs to be sliced.
It's just food. It's
Yeah.
just food.
Yeah.
So remember that it's just food and you know, it's not always you that failed. Sometimes recipes are just written poorly.
Mm,
And so don't you it's and if especially if you're trying a new recipe, you just have to go into it going, this sounds like it's going to be really good. The other thing I'm going to say is when you decide to try it, taste throughout. Don't follow the recipe verbatim until the end and then wonder why it didn't turn out.
yeah.
You really do need to
Yeah.
taste it throughout and trust what you're tasting, right? Like you do know what you like and what you don't like as you're eating. And so taste as you're cooking and start small. Just be willing to try one new recipe a week and
Mhm,
start with something simple like a sheet pan meal where you're cutting things up in big chunks and you're cooking it all on one sheet pan in the oven.
mhm.
And just start really simple and start small
Yeah.
as you build that confidence. Like
Mhm.
I wouldn't start, if you're afraid of cooking and start going for a 3 hour, complicated dish.
Yeah.
Start with sheet pan meals are so easy because you can use anything you have in your fridge and throw a little olive oil and any seasoning you have, and it's probably going to turn out fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I watch the Food Network too, but for those who are terrified of Gordon Ramsay, just the vision of what he would say. This tastes like
Yeah.
crap. It's not
Right.
cooked. It's
Right. Well,
overcooked.
and we all have that fear. Like we want to please our families. That's
Yeah.
inherent. We're nurturers, right?
Mhm.
And so it's inherent that we want them to be happy. But not everybody's going to like everything that you cook. That doesn't mean you have to, if you like it, that doesn't mean you have to change anything. It
Mhm.
means that maybe tonight you cooked for you and you really enjoyed it and they didn't. And tomorrow night you can cook one of their favorites.
Yeah.
It's really learning to let go of that perfectionism, which is hard. I mean,
Mhm. Mhm.
that's what got me to the space where I felt like I was throwing food on the table because I was trying to cook something really fancy every night of the week. And then I was putting these expectations on myself and
Mhm.
I was putting expectations on my family for my own happiness.
Mm.
Their reactions are how I defined whether I was succeeding.
Yeah.
And when I finally realized that and started doing more meal planning and cooking what I wanted to,
Mhm.
and making sure that I was also cooking their favorites, um,
Mm.
it it really changed, and it changed the way that we communicated around the table. It changed the way everybody showed up, and
Yeah.
I've seen our relationships blossom as a result of that, which is kind of what really led me to do this business.
Yeah. Yeah.
In addition to seeing that gap out there, like
Yeah.
it does make a huge difference. And so if I could, there's one exercise that
Mm.
that I love to do with my clients. And it is as simple as kind of a short visualization of just closing your eyes and remembering the last time you cooked dinner and you were stressed and angsty about it
Mhm,
and how that felt. And then
mhm.
imagine the energy you took to the table and what that conversation was like.
Mm,
And it doesn't feel good, right?
no.
But now I want you to close your eyes and think, I know what I'm cooking for dinner tonight. I know it has my kids' favorites in it, and I'm trying something new for me, and I'm
Mhm.
excited about it. How does that feel in comparison if you took that energy
Mm,
into what you were cooking and then to the table where you're excited to share it,
very big difference. Yeah, big
right?
difference. Yeah, yeah, very,
It's a
very
big
big difference.
difference, but it's
Yeah.
a small tweak, right? It's a
Very
small
big
tweak.
difference. Yeah, yeah. Um, did you also dealt with different family members of yours that were allergic to stuff or
I
sensitive?
probably me more than anybody. I'm the one that has the most sensitive system in my household. In
Oh,
terms of picky, I
yeah.
have family that's picky about
Mm-hmm.
textures and words, remarkably enough, words of foods like
Yeah,
meat and pie don't belong in the same sentence, like
yeah.
things like that.
Oh,
It's probably more me. So I've had to get creative over time trying to figure out what my body didn't like. So played with, different ways of cooking gluten free and dairy free.
mm,
And so, my business doesn't cater to specific diets, but I say like we can work within whatever your restrictions are because I have resources or people if I'm not the one that can help you. I find outside of cheese, dairy free to be the more simple
yeah,
one to do. Gluten free can be a little bit more difficult, especially when it comes to baking because textures end up different, right?
yeah.
So you can get gluten free pasta, but leftover gluten free pasta just kind of
Ugh,
dissolves and
I
becomes
don't like it.
mush.
I've tried it. We
Yeah, I
tried,
don't mind it in the moment, but leftovers, I won't even keep them.
yeah, yeah. Which takes me to my next question about leftovers. Some leftovers are very tasty, others are
Yes.
very crappy and shitty. You just throw them away. So, yeah, they are. They are. Yeah. What are some of your favorite leftover recipes that you've used?
Oh, so leftover recipes. So I think frittatas are one of the best ways to use leftovers
Mm,
because you really can, it's kind of like the sheet pan meal, right? You can take all those leftovers and you can pour them on top of that egg and that skillet and throw it in the oven and you've got breakfast meal prepped for like 3 days, or you've got brunch for Saturday with your leftovers.
yeah.
So that's one of my favorites. And so like stuffed bell peppers are great in a frittata.
Hmm.
Um, Leftover taco fixings are great in a frittata. Like I haven't found anything yet that isn't great in a frittata. And
Mm,
then you're not eating it again for dinner and you're changing the flavor profile of it by adding something else and mixing it with the egg. So that's one of my favorites.
hmm.
Um, Another one of my favorites is things like meatballs because leftover meatballs can then be put into pie crust with some pesto sauce and mozzarella and be like a calzone, or they can be put in a quick 15-minute Italian wedding soup with some chicken broth and vegetables, and you've
Mm,
changed the total flavor profile.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so those are, I kind of think about ways to turn them into something totally different rather than using them as is, because
Mm.
that's what gets boring. Unless you're
Yeah, yeah.
chili or soup or stew,
Hmm.
like I can eat them one more time after I've had them for dinner, and then I'm like, okay, we got to turn this into something different.
Yeah, yeah. You want to know what I freeze? It's spices. I make it by myself. Like I get big chunks of stuff and I just slice, cut, and blend it all with spices, oil, and I put it in the ice cubes and
Hmm.
I freeze it. That way I
That's
don't
brilliant.
spend 30 minutes. I just pop it out, toss it in the frying pan or soup, and it's done. I may need
Love
to add
that.
a bit of salt, but yeah,
Yeah,
you do
same thing
that.
with fresh herbs because they go bad so quickly.
Yeah,
If you use them in a recipe, like again, mix them with water or broth in an ice cube tray, and you've got fresh herbs for your next meal. Like
yeah.
love those,
Yeah, and also
love those.
whole chickens or turkeys. I've seen people throwing away the skin, the bones. I'm like, oh, don't do it.
Well, because they were never taught how to make a stock,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
They
yeah.
don't know.
I'm like, oh my gosh, don't use all of it.
Well,
I've
and even
used
the
all
same
of
thing, like
mine. Yeah.
The greens from your celery or the parts that you cut off, wash them. Again, that's another way to make vegetable stock. Like there are ways to reduce waste if you're willing to invest the time and effort to do so.
Hmm.
Saves you money and waste, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I do a lot of cooking where I call it like cook once, eat 3 times. So it might be intentionally making a big batch of meatballs, and I'll cook with one batch of them to make spaghetti and meatballs one night, and I'll freeze the rest so that I have them to do those like other recipes that we talked about.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think that's another way that you can save yourself some time and money and have fewer leftovers, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Meatballs are my favorite. I'll tell you why. Because of my son, he's picky. I blend spinach, I hide all of it in there, and he's eating it. He has no clue what he's eating. It's
I
just
have a
all
recipe
hidden
from
in there.
Pampered Chef that is beef and broccoli meatballs.
Ooh.
And so they grind up the broccoli. And so you get that like beef and broccoli taste of like Asian food, right? And it's
Yeah.
actually cooked in the microwave over some rice with a sauce. And it's done in like 20 minutes or something. It's so
Wow.
easy
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so delicious.
Yeah.
But again, you're getting those vegetables inside that. I have a recipe for a turkey pesto meatball that I love, and it has
Mm.
spinach and carrots in it as well
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Oh,
are really good. And I use those suckers for
yeah.
everything.
Yeah. Do you have recipes on your website? Do you put recipes
I
on
have
your
a few.
website?
It's something I'm currently rolling out. But I'm just getting ready to launch. I've just been building. It is, I call it the Magic Mealtime Maker,
Mhm.
and it is a Notion recipe database.
Mhm.
And right now it has about 50 recipes. It will have 100 when I'm done.
Yeah.
But what it allows you to filter by your dietary preferences, cook time, how many you're serving, and get to that short list of recipes that works for you.
Yeah.
And then you can go into that recipe and select whether you want to cook it on Tuesday or Thursday. And then it creates like a rough draft of your grocery list. And so making it really, and they're all recipes from what I consider trusted resources. Like I feel like they're known for being written well and
Mhm.
tasting good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's going to launch in the next couple of weeks for $27. And you can make a copy of it, duplicate it, make a copy of it for yourself, add your own recipes, change it up however you want. But yeah,
Mhm.
that's
That's so cool.
because the one thing I've struggled with on my website is how do I get all the recipes out there in the right format where I'm not a food blogger. I don't want to write all the blog posts. I just
Yeah. Yeah.
want recipes out there. And so this was
Yeah.
one fun way I could get them out there. And
Mhm.
then I have a monthly membership program called the Cook, Connect, and Conquer Club. It's $37 a month. We do a monthly cook along and social hour where I send you the grocery list a week ahead of time. And on Zoom, we cook everything together. And I give you time saving tips and tricks along the way. And then we have a deep discussion about some topic around food. We've done picky eaters, seafood. The next one in November is meal prep.
Yeah.
And then there's a resource library that will have that recipe database.
Mhm.
It has different meal planners, and I call it your personal kitchen witch. But there is an option in there where you can go in and say, I have chicken, tomatoes, and rice in my pantry. What can I cook? And
Mhm.
it'll automatically give you a
Yeah.
recipe.
Oh, wow. That's so
So
cool.
yeah, it's $37 a month. I would love to have you, come check it out. You can cancel
Mhm.
anytime. There's no like
Yeah.
prerequisite of
Okay.
time in there, but it is a way to simplify cooking. It's fun because it's social,
Yeah.
and you get all those time savings tips, and you get access to any recipes and recipe books that I create. So for every month event, there's a handout or a guide and a collection of 3 to 5 recipes.
Oh, anything with fun and food, I'm in.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I have two questions for you as we wrap up. I
Yeah.
know this conversation has been around food, and it's been a very delicious conversation that I'm hungry. So, my question for you, which I asked every guest, is what is the meaning of life for you?
Mhm. Connections and new experiences,
Mm,
like constantly learning through, for me it comes through again food, but also comes through travel, and it comes through meeting new people,
mhm,
um,
mhm.
learning more about the human experience. That's really through all of those things for me is really what it is. That's where the abundance and the joy, and how if I'm doing those things I feel successful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Second and last question. Where can my listeners find you, work with you, and support what you do?
Yeah. So my website is triciasbitesoflife.com.
Mhm.
And then you can also, I hang out mostly on Facebook. You can find my business page at Tricia's Bites of Life, or I'm sorry, it's Tired to Inspired Cooking. And
Mhm.
then you can just find me on Facebook. But that's, I do have a fun freebie called Bringing Fun Back into Mealtime. And so I'll be sure that Bernadette has that link, but you join my email list and you'll get a meal planner, an easy 3-night meal plan, and 10 different 20 yeah 10 different ideas on how you can bring fun back into mealtime
Yeah, that's awesome.
that I
Well,
would love to
yeah,
extend to your listeners.
yeah, absolutely. Well, Trisha, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for such a delicious conversation. And
Thank you for
thank you
having
for
me. It's
bringing,
been so much fun.
yeah, yeah, the time just went by. I don't like when time does that to me.
I know.
It just, whoop, it went by. And I want
Every
to
year
thank
it goes
you.
by faster.
Yeah, I'm like, what happened? Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. I love what you do. Like I said, this is my first interview with someone that does what you do, and it's needed. You're bringing fun and happiness and love into cooking, which
Yeah,
most of us are have lost. So
we
thank
have.
you.
And like every one of us deserves to feel seen, loved, and heard. And I just don't think there's a better place to do that than around the table. And that goes not only for who we're cooking for, but for us as well.
Yeah,
And if we want to be feel seen, loved, and heard, we have to bring ourselves open enough to receive that back.
yeah, yeah, I agree. Thank you so much, Trisha.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.